This video is brought to you by Squarespace. In this video, I'm going to do my very best to answer the question, which wood finishing methods gives the best result? I went super deep, tested a ton of different variables from multiple different manufacturers and different application methods because I wanted to see what actually makes a difference when it comes to staining and finishing wood and what is just a bunch of extra work with no better results. Now, like you can see, I've tested a ton of different things. Everything from how easy it is to apply the different stains and wood finishes, how many steps there are to get to the finished result, to create just over 230 individual wood samples and tests. I might have gone a little bit overboard here by testing over 70 of those samples against stain resistance with regular household items, creating over 1,000 different data points to figure out which methods are good at protecting against stains and which ones might not be. And a great spoiler alert, some of the methods that I thought was really good and I've used a bunch in the past turn out not so much. More on that later. In case you're new here, we spent the last few weeks building a fully custom kitchen that will go into an apartment that we spent the better part, actually a little bit more of a year, fully renovating. Now, this thing right here is the first part of that kitchen. That's the kitchen island, complete with fully custom framework, drawers and everything. And although natural oak looks quite nice, for our application to fit into the room that it's going to be in, we want to stain this quite a lot darker. So that's what we're going to test today. Now, this whole journey all started when Duri very kindly provided us with a range of different colors and stains from the company called Psychos. Now, that was super nice because in the beginning, we had no idea what color we wanted the kitchen to be. So by having a range of different colors, we were able to create test pieces that we then can use to figure out what color we want. And that's where the whole process started, because we quickly realized that not only is there a difference in what product you use, but also how you apply it, what type of product it is, and much more. Quick disclaimer, Duri, which provided us with the samples from Psychos, do not know that I'm making this video and have no control over any of the results that I'm showing here. Neither do any of the other manufacturers of any of these products. So these are the criteria and tests that we wanted to do to figure out which product and method is the best for our application. First up, regardless of method, what looks the best? This is obviously purely personal preference, but at the end of the day, what are the most important things? Second, how easy is it to achieve that result and how much skills do you need to get there? Now, this one is very important to us because I'm going to be doing this whole process together with my girlfriend Vilda, whom which I've renovated this entire apartment with, and whether or not a board that she does one day and I do another day look the same and are able to be right next to each other is very important. Another thing that's very important to us is the total time it takes to get to the finished result. How much prep, how many layers do you need to apply, how long do you need to wait in between. Obviously, there's a lot of area, so price for different products to finish result is really important. Lastly, health and safety. Do they contain any toxic chemicals? And do you need to take any safety precautions? The products that we'll be testing in this video are from Osmo, which is the brand I'm most used to. We're gonna pair a hard wax oil with a stain. Then a range of very similar products from Psychos, also hard wax oil and stain. We're gonna compare that to Ruby and Monaco, which is a two-part mixture that you have to mix together. And lastly, Libron wood stain, which is a pure stain and needs to be covered with a top coat. And since most of our kitchen is oak veneered MDF or plywood, we're going to be testing the majority of these tests on these boards. We've also done additional tests on actual oak hard wood and pieces that have edge banding onto them. To not get too crazy, I'll tell you right now, there are no significant differences that I could find. So for the rest of this video, we'll just talk about veneered surfaces. Now, by the way, both Osmo and Psychos have launched similar products to Rubio Monocoat, both with a two-part system that on paper are very similar. Now, I didn't include it in these tests, but if that's something you want me to test out, and if these types of videos are something that you enjoy, let me know down in the comments below. Now, there's so many different variables and you have to start somewhere. I decided to start just one step before you apply the product, which is with sandpaper grits. I did the same test with each product, sanding one row with 120, one with 180, 240, and 360. I then applied the stain on the whole board and then wiped it all back off. The tests here show that the coarser the grit, the more stain the wood will absorb, and the finer you sand, the less stain it will absorb. That is true for all of them, with the Cycles all having the biggest variation and the stain having the least amount of variation. Now both Cycles, Osmo, and Rubio recommend that you sand to 120, maximum 150. But the problem with that is that I was still able to see some of the sanding marks in the 120 grit sample, which is only really a thing if you use dark stains, but those sanding marks are really visible and I don't like that. So I decided to do all the future testing for all the rest of these boards with 100 grit sandpaper, because that was the lowest grit that I tested that didn't show any sanding marks. I just want to mention that all these products are quite flammable, with Rubio, Cycles, and Osmo actually having a risk of spontaneously combusting if they're left unattended. I mean, I think they'll do it if you watch them as well, but the point is, all the rags and all the paper that have the product suspended in them should be covered in water and then disposed of. I also wanted to test if there's any other things that can impact the result, so I took the whole board, sanded everything, covered half of it, and blew the dust off the top half, and then finished all the sections the same way. In my kind of limited test, I found no difference between blowing off the dust and just leaving it on there, but on larger boards that might impact the evenness of the result. Also, I'm using an orbital sander that has a dust vacuum attached to it, so most of the dust gets sucked up anyways. So for the rest of these sample boards, I didn't blow the dust off of them. Next up, how easy is it to apply the different products? Starting off with the Liberon Spirit Dye. Now, although I've used this product a couple of times in the past, I'm by no means an expert. While I had no problem getting a smooth and even result on the smaller samples, this was much harder on the large board. I tried applying it in sections, moving fairly quickly across the board, but even then you can still see the lap marks where the two different sections overlapped. By applying a second coat, those lap marks mostly disappeared, but were still a little bit visible. Now that second coat also made the whole thing darker, and I tried a third coat which made it even more darker. So unfortunately, even though I really like the color the stain creates, and it's probably one of the ones that stained the wood most efficiently, for our application, since we're doing such a large area and we're going to be two different people doing it, this is just too hard of a method applying it. I've still done the same resistance testing on this, but for our application, this one is out. For the remaining 3 products, I divided 3 of these boards into 4 sections, applying the finish in 4 different ways. The whole first row is applied with one of these Osmo sponges. You put in a bunch of products, rub it in. I didn't wipe any of it off on any of the tests. Second row, pretty similar, only this time applied with one of these pads for the orbital machine. This is a pretty fine pad, rubbed it all in, and I didn't wipe any of it back off. Next row, essentially the same thing, just with a coarser pad. I've cut these out of a larger pad for floors, and this is quite a bit coarser than the white one. Lastly, applied the product and then wiped it back off, leaving no residue. This is the one from Cycles, this is the one from Rubio. They're pretty similar. In general, the Karate Kid wipe on, wipe off pads are the brightest, meaning that they probably have the least product on them. And for all of them, the darkest one is the Osmo pad, which probably leaves the most materials on there. Across the board, the red ones leave a more matte surface finish, and the white ones a little bit of a shinier finish. Which is interesting enough, but then all the different manufacturers also have different ways that they want you to apply the different products. Osmo wants you to rub it in with one of these and then wipe it back off. Cycles wants you to distribute it with a spatula and then rub it in with one of these pads, not wiping it off. Rubio wants you to apply with a pad and then wipe it all the way back off. Now, in danger of getting too crazy with too many variables and too many tests, not that I've not already gone there. In my testing, I found no real difference between the ways you apply the product or the ways you wipe it back off. As long as you wipe everything back off, it doesn't matter how you apply or whether or not you wipe it off with a rag, a microfiber cloth, or a piece of paper. So all the wipe on, wipe off tests are just applied with a rag and wiped off with paper. Now, out of the 3 different products I've tested, both Osmo and Cycles want you to put another protective coat of hard wax oil on top of the stain. Well, Rubio says that that is a finished product, but that you can put a second coat on top of the first one. So that's what I did. I took the samples from before. For the bottom row, I left that untreated. The middle row, I applied a layer of top oil, which I wiped back off, just like I normally do on regular pieces of furniture. And on the very top row, I did what both Osmo and Psychos want you to do, and that is roll on a really thin layer and let that dry. Don't wipe anything off. I did those things to both Psychos and Osmo, and since Rubio doesn't want you to leave a thick layer of product on there, I did the next row, wipe on, wipe off like they want you to, and the top row I scuffed lightly because some guy on YouTube said that you should, and then applied the second row. I'll tell you right now, there's no difference between these two, so only one is included in the stain testing. So the question now is, which one has the best results? But first, a quick ad for today's sponsor, Squarespace. So when I'm not going crazy over testing way too many wood finishing samples, I usually make and design stuff like 3D printed boxes and pieces of furniture. And I sell the 3D files and build plans for those on a website which I created using Squarespace. Now, whether you sell physical or digital products, Squarespace has the merchandising features to make your products look their best online, including e-commerce templates, inventory management, a simple checkout process, and secure payments. Squarespace enabled me to super quickly and easily create my own website, and it was really easy to set up. With the new Squarespace Fluid Engine, it has never been easier for anyone to unlock unbreakable creativity. You can start with their best-in-class design templates and then customize every single detail with their new reimagined drag and drop technology that works both for mobile and desktop. Upload, organize, and access all your content from one place. With your new asset library, you're able to manage all your files from one central hub. Head to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when we're ready to launch, head to squarespace.com/ALCH for 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. For Rubio, the most noticeable difference is that from 1 to 2 layers, it got darker, but also got a little bit more shine. Where the same thing is true for Osmo and Psychos, but more noticeably, the rolled layer has a much more noticeable and shinier top coat, while all the wiped surfaces are a lot more matte. Now, the shine of the top coat here obviously depends on the shine level of the product itself. Both of the manufacturers sell them in everything from high gloss to very low gloss. I did do a quick separate test for this and noticed that as long as you wipe off all the excess oil, the shine levels between a high gloss and a low gloss are indistinguishable. Also note that the Osmo and Psychos are clear top oils, where the Rubio is that same colored oil. Now, in addition to what it looks, there's one more important thing, and that is how it feels. In general, all the surfaces that are wiped off feel super nice and smooth to the touch. But for the rolled ones, those tend to get a little bit rough. That is because you leave on a much thicker layer, so dust particles and debris can get stuck in there, creating a rough surface. But also, sometimes some of the wood fibers can raise up a little bit, leaving a not so pleasant feel to the touch. Now here I want to mention a tip that one of the Osmo reps told me over the phone, which I almost didn't believe in the beginning. And that is, take a regular piece of cardboard, rub it on there, and with very little effort, this thing is super smooth. The cardboard rips off those tiny little wood fibers that have risen up, leaving a smooth surface. Now, that won't remove any of the lint or debris that might be caught in the surface. Also, that trick doesn't seem to work on the ultra matte top coat because it leaves scratches. Talking about scratches, that is one thing I did not test throughout any of this testing. If that's something you want me to include in maybe future tests, let me know in the comments right below that like button. Now, out of all of these tests, which ones do I like the best? And this is purely aesthetic. Now, there's a color I really like, this one, which is the Psychos oil. This is also the one that we did a larger test sample of early on in the process. Now, both this board and the one we like the best from here are applied the same way, with the maroon pad, which is the coarse one, not wiped off, and then a top layer wiped off. That gives a really nice even surface with a nice shine. Now, a finish that is extremely similar is the Rubio, especially the one that has 2 coats, super even color, really nice shine. Very hard to decide between the two of them. Now, obviously, this is just personal preference. The color you might like the best is not the same as I like. In terms of ease of application, they're all pretty similar as long as you compare the same process to the same process. Meaning, as long as you wipe both layers on the Rubio and wipe both layers on the Osmo or Psychos, They're pretty much the same amount of work. Rubio says that one coat is enough for a finished product, whereas the two other ones say that you need a second top layer. There's some interesting data regarding that in the stain tests, but if you want to follow the instructions from the manufacturers, you're looking at 1 day with one coat for Rubio, and you're looking at least 2 days if you want to first apply the finish in 1 day and then roll on a top coat on the second day for both Psychos and Osmo. If you plan on rolling on the product for the top coat, you might not be able to do all the sides at once for something like a cabinet door. So if you have to do that in 2 goes, you're looking at 3 days for both Psychos and Osmo, against 1 to 2 days with Rubio. Now on to the fun part, which is testing the stain resistance. The way I did it is that I picked 4 items that a surface in the kitchen might get exposed to. Those 4 being water, coffee, turmeric, and red wine. I then applied 4 drops of each liquid to each one of the samples and wipe them back off in intervals of 10 minutes, 30 minutes, 1 hour, and 3 hours. After 3 hours, I gave all the surfaces a really quick wipe with a damp cloth, let it dry for an additional 24 hours before I recorded the results. Now, the way I recorded the results, pretty simply, is just by looking at them, and I gave them a grade from 0 to 4. 0 being no stain at all, a 1 being a slight trace if you hold it up against the light. This is mostly just a change in how shiny a surface is. A 2 is a slight trace of color, meaning that if you look straight onto the wood, you can see a little shift in color. Either that's a stain, yellow or red, or a little bright spot from the water. A 3 is a visible stain, and a 4 is a heavy stain. I've tried my best to compare different ratings to each other and be equally strict on all of them, and I've gone back and changed things if I felt that I've been unfair to one or the other. Now I've taken all that data, entered that into that huge spreadsheet. If you add all the numbers from all the samples together, you get a total rating at the end that you can use to get a pretty good idea of how well that product held up. By the way, all this testing created a total of 1,136 data points. So now all I had to do was spend the better part of a day arguing back and forth with ChatGPT to try and get it to give me different formulas to sort these results based on different variables, which gave me the results I wanted, but was a somewhat frustrating experience because ChatGPT seems to be extremely confident in its abilities every single time, even though their equations don't always work first try or fourth try. But I'm happy, there's no way I would have done that on my own. That's one of the equations that it wrote for me. Now, first off, just sorting everything based on rating gives us this really nice gradient in color. Also, in general, some of the samples are from bigger test pieces and some are from small, and there's variations in the wood grain, so none of this is extremely accurate, but it's a good indication. Now, looking at this chart, we can see a couple of things. The rolled surfaces are the best ones, regardless of how much you sand them or what's underneath. With the exception of the heavily white pigmented ones, which are more prone to stains. But to be fair, I removed all the 120 grit samples because that didn't give us a good enough look. That's a lot of data, so having a quick look at the individual brands separately. For Psychos, there's a couple of things that we can learn. Obviously, the ones that have a rolled finish on the very top are the very best for stain resistance. The ones with a heavy base coat and a wiped top surface are also really good. And the ones that use the rough pad leave a more flat surface finish, so water stains are less visible. Also, in general, finer grits are worse, which is nice to see because that's what the manufacturers all tell us. And obviously, all the worst ones are the ones that they say are not a finished product. So all the base coats without the top coat. Looking at Osmo, a lot of the same things here. The top rolled surfaces are the best. The white, just like with Psychos, is the worst. Now there's one surprising thing here, and that is just a single heavy coat applied with the Osmo pad of just the base is quite stain resistant. Now both for the Psychos and Osmo, I only tested 2 variations of only applying a top coat, wiping it on and wiping it back off. I did that one clear and one white. And this one really surprised me because all 4 of the samples that were wiped off are consistently really bad. And the reason why that is so surprising is that that is the method that I've usually been using when finishing furniture. Like consistently, that's the go-to method that I've done every time. And it's terrible. Now, obviously, if you follow the instructions of either one, they tell you to don't do it, leave a rolled finish on top, which is really good. But I really thought a wipe finish would be better than really bad. So it seems like even a thick layer of base coat is better than a thin layer of top coat with either one. Now for Rubio, in terms of stain resistance, more product seems to be better. And in general, a higher grit is worse than a lower grit, like expected. Now the best one seems to be the red pad. I think that's purely because it leaves a rougher finish, so it's harder to see the water spots. This one is interesting. The water spots are visible, but the interesting thing is that they're equally visible on 10 minutes and 3 hours. And that only being as a rating 1, which you can't see by looking at it, you have to see it by the change in the reflection. Now for very limited spirit stain tests, rolled is great, no protection is terrible. Now since obviously the best ones are rolled, let's have a look at the finishes that are only wipe for either one of the layers. The top 3 best ones are from Psychos with 2 coats each. In fact, the top 6 all have 2 layers. Now the first 3 spots on the list, which only require 1 application, are all Rubio. Now in case we want the shortest route to finished product, let's filter out to only show all the single layer applications. From these, the Rubio ones are the 3 top. Osmo is slightly higher than Psychos on top. The top coat wiped off is really bad, and the worst one is the white pigmented top coat, which is wiped off, which is the exact finish I usually use on all furniture. Now, how harmful are these things to you? That's a quite difficult question, which I'm sure I'm not qualified to answer you. To start off with, all of these products recommend that you use gloves and don't get it in contact with skin. That same thing obviously also goes for eating it or getting it into your eyes. So start with that. Now to compare these, we're going to talk about something called VOCs, volatile organic compounds, which seems to be just a general term for all potentially harmful chemicals that can be inside of products. And these products range a great deal in VOC content. Rubio boasts with 0 VOC content on their oils. Now on the complete other end of the spectrum is the wood dye. This thing has about 760 grams per liter of VOCs. Now both top coats, both Osmo and Psychos, don't have exact numbers. All they specify is that they follow the EU regulations of being below 500 grams per liter. Now for the stain, Psychos has on the box eco and below 10%. Upon request, I got a technical data sheet which specifies 80 grams per liter. Whereas with the Osmo, I was only able to find a document that says that they're within the EU regulation of 400 grams per liter or below, which could be anything really. I did try and reach out to Osmo. They couldn't give me an exact number, but they did say that they qualify for the BREEAM standard and that their product is only made with natural oils. Last little side note, Rubio wants you to clean the wood with a wood cleaner, and compared with the oil, this thing is everything but VOC free. Coming in at 790 grams per liter. So even though you don't need to use a mask when doing this, for the cleaner, I definitely recommend you do. Lastly, let's talk about price. Since they all come in different sizes and specify different amounts of covering, I've just converted everything to be price per covered square meter. The Osmo Stain is $2.40 per square meter, and the Osmo Top Coat is $2.60. The Psycho Stain is $1.20 to $1.50, and the Psycho's Top Oil is $1.40 to $1.50. Rubio is about $2.90 to $4.90. And here's the kicker, the Leave Your Own Spirit dye is about $5.50 to $11 per square meter. What that means in the real world, if we take the kitchen as an example with about 50 square meters of area that we need to cover. Now, if we do as the manufacturer says with base and top coats, Psychos is about $129 to $154 for the finished result. Osmo about $252. Rubio is $147 to $245, and Libron with $343 to $625. Now let's be honest, I probably don't want to cover everything in 2 coats. So if we say that we only cover the fronts in 2 coats, that's about 20% of the surface. The numbers are 87 to 107 for Psychos, 174 for Osmo, 206 to 343 for Rubio, and 301 to 578 for Liberon. Also, quick side note, just the wood for this kitchen alone was $4,500. Now, with all that information and all these tests, what did we actually pick? Well, we picked Rubio, and there's a couple of different reasons why. One of the main ones being just how nice the color looks. Now, in general, I think it was a tie between the Rubio with 2 wipes and the Psychos that was first applied with this and then a wipe top. But since it's so much easier to just apply 2 wipe top coats instead of having to deal with the machine, that was a really important factor. Because like I said at the beginning, it's gonna be both me and Vilda doing multiple different parts over the period of multiple different days, and we want everything to look the same, which is really hard with really any other finishes that you don't wipe completely back off. Also, Rubio seems to offer the best protection of a single layer wiped, which is great because we can get away with only applying 1 wipe layer to all the sides of the drawers, inside the cabinets, and everything that doesn't get super high traffic. Now, yes, Rubio has worse stain resistance than especially the top roll coats, but we can apply the finish to all the sides at the same time. And for the vertical surfaces, I don't think it's going to be a huge issue. For a tabletop, maybe that's a little different. Now, after all this testing and after we decided which product that we wanted to use, I actually reached out to Rubio, which very kindly agreed to supply all the products for this kitchen. Neither Rubio or any of the other brands had any control over anything that went into this video or any of the testing or results. But after the rep from Rubio came by and delivered the products, we had a good chat. He also had some more products. I'll go into more detail in the next video where I'll actually put these products to the test. But really quick, one thing I didn't do at all in any of the tests I did was prep the wood with any sort of cleaner. Rubio says that they want you to use this cleaner. I did a couple of really quick tests. It made no difference whether or not I used this. I didn't do anything or I blew the surface clean. But on really large surfaces like a floor, I can see how this is a good insurance just to make sure that everything is consistent. They also have something called wood prep, which makes the surface a lot darker on the first coat, but that one leaves a much rougher texture that I don't think is nice for a furniture type finish. But it does not have any VOCs. He also gave me a bunch of tips for applying the product and getting the best results. We'll try all of that out when we actually go to apply the product to all the parts in our kitchen, because although we've spent a lot of time on testing, we've also made good progress on the rest of the kitchen and built more and more of it, so that once we get some finish on these parts, we're getting really close to starting to install it back home. I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave a comment down below if you did, click the like button, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye bye. Hey you.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Sanding.